Welcome to the SIP, the Solstice Innovations podcast. In each episode, we chat with industry experts and innovators in insurance and insurtech. Join us for insights on trends, technologies, and the stories driving our industry forward. Let's sip on knowledge together at the SIP. Welcome to part 2 of this 2-part episode of the SIP with Robert Cole. Well, we've talked a lot about your role at National Risk. We've talked a lot about flood. Let's take a little bit of a pivot here. No pun intended for those that are real familiar with the NFIP program. But you also play another role. So your National Risk brokerage is your day job, but you have a side gig of sorts with the National Flood Association, or the NFA. So can you talk a little bit about what is the NFA and what role are you currently playing there?
Sure. So NFA, National Flood Association, trade organization, nonprofit that is a conglomeration of all the industry players that are in the flood space, right? And so it was a kind of a natural evolution from, I think, originally the Flood Determination Group that has since brought in stakeholders, everybody that participates in flood. And so you've got not only the determination companies and technology companies, and you've got agents and brokers and lenders and lender-placed insurance. It's every stakeholder that kind of connects. And, really our mission at NFA is to provide a unified voice for the flood community in working with FEMA or with legislators, politicians. And it's something I got involved in, well, I guess it's a number of years ago now. Was elected to the board, and this year is my first year of serving as president. It's the duties are not everything that was on the brochure when I read it. It's been a little bit more work than I thought, but it has been very rewarding, and it's an opportunity to give back and to take a leadership role in the industry. And so I'm excited to do it. And I'd say one of the big benefits is meeting folks like you and being able to learn more from your peers that you don't necessarily always interact with on a daily basis, but it's very helpful when you have a question.
Yeah. As a member of the NFA, I appreciate you and you playing the role of president of the NFA. It's key. What I really like about it is something that you hit upon, and that's that there's all of these different entities that are involved in some form or fashion in the flood industry. And it's the only place where everyone can come together and talk about their specific areas of specialty, interest, and concern. And like you said, create that unified voice. To me, that's very powerful. So,
100%. It's for me, the collaboration that occurs, and when you think about the fact that it's nobody's getting paid for some of the work that's getting done, and there's a lot of work that goes into some of these comment letters and interactions with FEMA is a big stakeholder as far as who we're communicating with. And I think it's a big benefit for the stakeholders as well, right? Because you've got one place that you can go to that a lot of different opinions come together. And if we're taking the ownership of trying to pull all that information together in like one communication piece, it's got to be hugely advantaged as opposed to other areas where, hey, we're about to do X, Y, and Z, and you're trying to gather information from all over the place. So I think, we benefit from being able to have that conduit with external stakeholders, but at the same time, I think that those stakeholders benefit from being able to go to one place to get the answer.
I would certainly hope so, because I can't. Can you even imagine being someone on the Hill that's trying to do something with or listen to constituents talk about anything that has to do with flooding? And, where do you go for information, and how do you get educated, or how does your staff get educated? And it can be really challenging. So I think the work that the NFA does is really important in that respect.
Absolutely. You hit right on it. I mean, stakeholders, especially when you look at congressional staff, they change over quite a bit. Now, we've been lucky to have some people in the flood space that have worked on the Senate committees, as well as working for certain House members that are fairly tenured, but a lot of them have changed over in the last couple of years. And if you look at the average, and this is just my outside, I don't do as much with DC as some of the other members do, but it skews younger, right, on the staffers that are participating, and it's a constant education piece as you get new staff. It may be the same member of Congress, but you get new staff members, and you're bringing them up to speed with a product that they may not have encountered yet, right? Because if you're a younger person out of college, a couple years in your working profession, you may not have bought a home, or even dealt with the insurance piece and dealing with flood and understanding how all these things work together and what happens when you move this piece and how other things get affected. So I think kind of maintaining that relationship has been beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, so let's take it back to your day job, National Flood, National Risk Brokerage. So, how does your involvement with the NFA, or does it, come back and help you with your approach to managing flood risk for clients?
So twofold, right? I think overall, just being involved with the NFA at all has been a huge leverage point because you're working day to day with your clients, and things are naturally going to pop up that are outside of your nine dots, right? And so it's one of those of, this is a really good question. My client needs to know the answer, but they don't know who to reach out to. And so being that point of contact of, hey, I was at the conference in Scottsdale, or I was on a conference call with the lender work group, or wherever it was, I know somebody that knows that answer. Being able to put those two together, it's not necessarily a money maker for me, but you're continuing to build that goodwill, not just with your client, but the person that you referred over, right? And so building that community and being able to use those leverage points from your client's perspective makes you even more valuable, because you're viewed as somebody that can help them get stuff done, even though it's not necessarily in your wheelhouse. Outside of that, I would say beneficial for my agency as a whole has been getting to know different people and meeting different sections of the industry, to where you're building those relationships over time and learning more about not just where you sit in that flood life cycle or ecosystem, but how you're impacting others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, earlier we were talking about technology in the insurance space, and sometimes the insurance industry gets a little bit of a black eye because it feels like it's moving a little bit slower when it comes to adapting new technologies, and that's fair when compared to some other industries that can afford to be more aggressive. But if you look back over time, there's been a lot of technological change over the decades in the insurance space, and so I'd like to kind of think about that in terms of the flood risk management space, and how it has evolved, or how has it evolved over the years? What trends do you currently see in that industry?
Sure. And so, not something that I'm specifically involved in, but just through NFA, you learn about some of the other things that are going on. So, like in the mapping space, there's a lot of new mapping technologies that are coming out that allow for a better understanding of flood risk. I know some of our members that are in that area are taking advantage of that and using those tools to educate clients more. And so you've got some of those innovations in the risk management space, but outside of just purely when you think of technology, some of the other advancements that are going on are around mitigation, right? And so getting better understanding of what works and what doesn't, and how that interacts with underwriting. And so, what is it that I can really do for my house that will decrease the likelihood of flooding? Or what is it that, we can do at a community level that will reduce our likelihood of flooding? And so, I think in combination of not just the mappers and the insurers, but also some of the things that FEMA's done around community involvement. And I guess, nowadays you can't get through an insurance podcast without, talking a little bit about parametric insurance, right? So I'll throw it out there for the parametric fans. Those are some new ideas that sometimes I have a hard time embracing on the parametric side, but it's at least new things that are coming to the table where we're trying to think about things from a different viewpoint.
Got one last question for you, Robert, and we've touched on some of this as we've gone. So a little of this might be repeat, but let's put a point on it. So as you look out into the future, and now specifically talking about flood insurance regulations or practices, I asked you if you were king of the world, what would you change about the NFIP? But more broadly, um, what would what are some things that you would hope to see that you think would benefit the industry and consumers?
So I think that, you know, if I'm king of, and I'm not sure how we get there, right? But getting away from the 100-year floodplain and the line in the sand and somehow kind of treating flood as another peril. And so, I think that as you look more broadly at the insurance industry as a whole and property in the ecosystem, the probably the biggest underinsured or misunderstood risk is flood outside the special flood hazard area, right? And so, to a certain extent, over the last year or so, on the hazard side, we've been talking a lot with the GSEs, the Fannies, and the Freddies around, are people insured to their full RCV, and do they have enough insurance? But then the blind side to me seems to be in the flood space around, you've got all these people that are just right on the other side of the line that have zero insurance at all for flood, and yet their neighbor across the street is required to have it. And so, somehow we've got to figure out a way to better manage that. And I know that that's always the $100 million question of how do we get there, right? And I don't have this podcast is not going to be the breaking news on how we fix that problem. But if I'm king of the world, that's the problem that we solve.
All right. Appreciate it, Robert. Again, thanks a lot for being here. I guess before we break, I should ask if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about or mention that we didn't get to.
No, not at all. Look, I appreciate you having me. It's been fun to sit here and chat with you. When I was logging on, I saw the SIP, and I'm curious as to see what the other episodes are. So I'm anxious to dig in and see what other folks have to say. So appreciate you having me on, and look forward to listening in the future.
All right. Thanks a lot, Robert Cole. This has been The SIP, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.